Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about retirement, 401ks and stuff. What does it take to have a million in a 401k? Is, um, is a million enough in a 401k? What do you need? Well, let's just say that your goal is to have $1 million by the time you retire, right? So for a lot of people, that sounds kind of like, okay, that can that really happen? Like, can I even do that? I mean, you can. I promise you can. But what are you picturing right now, right? Are you imagining putting away money for, you know, 20, 30, 40 years and, holding it in cash, like in a savings account or, like that's what you're going to need to do to save a lot of money to get to a million, right? Along the way, your budget could be really tight. Well, really, what I want you to do is change that mental picture, right? Because instead, we're going to invest in a 401k or there's other retirement savings accounts you can do, but we're going to use a 401k for this example. But we're going to invest in a 401k with the goal of having $1 million, right? In like 25 to 40 years, because it really depends on your timeline, right? And it's gonna sound like it might sound like semantics and stuff like that, but it's actually much easier, especially if you're gonna start saving early, right? To let your investments do a lot of the heavy lifting, right? The earlier you start, the easier it's gonna be for you, right? So let's talk about what it takes. Okay, you can contribute. So this is in 2021. You can contribute up to 19,500 in a normal 401k, right? So the good news is that you don't have to save anywhere near that much per year if your goal is to have $1 million at, let's say your retirement age is going to be 65, right? Now, some people might say, oh, that's really old. I don't want to wait that long. Some people might think the opposite. Oh, 65, I can retire that early. Yeah, everyone's got different goals in mind, but we're going to use 65 as an example. Um, the earlier you start investing, the longer your investment will compound, right? Meaning your money will grow exponentially, right? Bigger and bigger. It's just no end to it. You can do the math yourself if you have. You can go online and Google like a financial calculator, retirement calculator, 401 calculator, right? You can just do this yourself. But in case you don't have it handy, you know, you can return to it later, or you could pause the video now and go look at it, right? So we're gonna talk about, you know, a, an example where like if you're in your early 20s, you want to start saving 10% in your 401k. Let's say in your early 20s would be like 20 to 24, right? In your late 20s would be like 26 to 30, right? And there's just like kind of these milestones you want to start hitting for each age bracket is what I'll say, right? But let's talk about the market rate of return, right? Like how do we know what stocks are going to return over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years? Like how do we know? Well, realistically, I don't know, you don't know, nobody knows, right? Nobody knows. If we did know, we'd know exactly what we need to do to save to reach our goal. But since we don't, what we're going to do is make educated guesses, right? That's what we're going to do instead. So how do we come up with a 6% or a 7% or an 8% return, right? Well, over the past 90 years, stocks, benchmarked by the S&P 500, have returned about 10% per year on average, right? Adjusted for inflation, and this is sometimes what's referred to as the real return, stocks have gained around 7% per year on average. So does this mean the S&P 500 will earn around 7% after inflation in every year going forward? Of course not, right? But this is just the smoothed out average annual return over the past 80, 90 years. Importantly though, there is no there's no accurate way to guess what stocks will do over short term periods. Over multi-decade period though, 7% per year is as reasonable an estimate as any other. Again, though, there's no guarantees. So if you want to be more conservative in your estimate, you could use 6% or 5% as a return for stocks. The result of lowering that growth rate will be that the recommended savings amount goes up, right? So, in other words, the market won't do as much heavy lifting and you'll have to save more or invest more, right? So, the downside of saving more in the present is that you may have to keep a pretty tight budget, which can be really difficult for a lot of people, right? And if you don't know how to budget, I've made a video on that. You can go check that out. And there's another video on what types of budgets are right for different people as well, right? But the upside is obviously going to be you'll have more money saved. Also, I don't want you to forget part of your contribution might come from your employer in the form of a company match. So, like, let's say your employer matches the first 5% of your 401k at 50 cents on the dollar, right? So that means that if you save at least 5% of your paycheck, let's say your base salary is $40,000, that's about 2 grand. Your employer adds in $1,000. So that means you only have to save 4,000 per year, which would be 10% of your salary to get into the ballpark you want to be in, right? So here's another question though. Is $1 million gonna be enough? Well, now that we've figured out how to save $1 million, we should ask ourselves if that's even an appropriate target. Is it a considerable amount of money, right? Like it's a lot. It's a considerable amount of money, right? And it's a lot more than many people have when it comes time to retire. But if you have 20, 30 years until retirement, inflation takes a toll, and you might find that $1 million just isn't a whole lot of money, right? Think of the difference between if someone had $1 million today versus if you had $1 million in, 1980. Like, huge difference, right? And so, I mean, again, that's only 40 years ago, right? It's like, wow. So, the goal in retirement savings is drawdown, right? And to maintain your current lifestyle, right? So you want to have that savings, right? And plus or minus some expenses, maybe more travel spending, but less money required for commuting and new clothing, right? A lot of people focus on replacing 80% of their pre retirement paycheck. Also, remember that Social Security will provide some income in retirement, but not a lot. And a lot of people will tell you that Social Security is not going to be around, like when I retire, say the next, 20 years or so. Like, oh, you won't have Social Security when you retire. Like, it'll be gone. I mean, it's definitely a possibility. I think it's highly unlikely, but I think it's still a possibility. But that's just something that some people they forget sometimes, right? You still have some earning power in retirement, especially if you maintain a modest allocation to stocks in your portfolio, right? So for that reason, right, it's recommended that you base your savings goal on your household's anticipated cash flow needs rather than an arbitrary number. So, for example, the company Fidelity, right? They periodically release recommended age based saving benchmarks expressed in terms of multiples of salary, right? And they're pretty decent benchmarks if you look at them. The problem with homing in on a dollar amount is that it might be a lot more or a lot less than you're going to need in retirement, depending on your current salary and lifestyle. Saving a considerable amount for your retirement isn't impossible, right? It can be difficult, right? Of course, like, saving is difficult for anybody. And especially in the early stages of your career, like when incomes are lower, right? Hopefully you can afford to sock away, you know, 100, 200, $300 a paycheck, right? Uh, it might be out of reach for some, and for others it may be easier, but there should be some sort of savings plan. You get your all your bad debt out of the way. You're paying your good debt, and then you're trying to you put away 50, 100, $150. Say every Friday or every paycheck or whatever it is, and over the long term, like that adds up. So I just want you guys to think about, instead of saying I want to have $1 million when I retire, I want you to think about, okay, how much money am I gonna need to live the lifestyle I live? If right now you make $60,000, you can invest $20,000, and you're living off of $35,000, then you might want to have a retirement that's going to be able to pay you about $50,000 or so available to you each year in retirement, and so that it doesn't go away, like, so you don't use up all your retirement in, like, say, a 10-year span, because you want it to last. If you retire at 65, like in the example, you don't want it to be gone by the time you're 75. You want it to last until whenever it is, that you're no longer in this world, God forbid. But that's going to happen. Or maybe you want to have enough money there to leave to someone else. So just some things to think about. I really hope you guys like this video. Go ahead and like the video, subscribe if you're not subscribed already, and until I see you guys in the next video, y'all be safe.